Hey there! Did you know Kroger always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Kroger app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
At Consumer Cellular, you get the same exact coverage as the largest carriers, but for up to half the cost. Same thing, up to half the cost. Up to half the cost for the same thing. 50% the money for 100% the same thing. I hope I'm making myself clear. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Half the cost savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single-line 5GB data plan with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single-line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plan offered by T-Mobile and Verizon May 2023.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to another podcast from Anfield Index Pro. What we'll call this one, I'm not sure, but the topic of it is indeed big decisions. And I'm joined for this chat by Mr. Dave Davis. It's been a while, buddy.
Yeah, it feels like an eternity. I feel like I've lost you to the other day when you've gone into sort of the film and the hipster realm, and now I've got to pull you back into the football reality.
Yes, it's time to get gritty again and deal with some topics that, you know, we could talk about at any given time. They're not necessarily as time sensitive, which is exactly why they're occurring as they are in the international break. So we have 4 topics today, another 4 tomorrow. I'm sure we might wedge 1 or 2 extra things in here, but we'll just outline briefly for folks what it is we're going to talk about, because the first decision we're going to make is whether or not the club should react to some dubious behaviour. Then we're going to talk about whether or not we have gotten under the skin of our direct rivals for the title. And in terms of decisions, I guess it's, you know, how best to apply the pressure then on the back of that. The next topic we want to talk about is the exit from the FA Cup and whether or not that can be used in a decisive way to impact the league run-in and everything that's left in Europe. And then finally, we'll finish with this one because it's going to be a big and sprawling topic, which is Mr. Michael Edwards and his return. There's been a lot written about it, a lot talked about it, but I think we can offer a kind of interesting aspect that I haven't heard too much in terms of what decisions should Michael Edwards now be making when it comes to our playing staff and whether or not we should be extending our superstars' contracts and so on. So looking forward to this one, buddy. Let's start with our good old pals, the PGMOL. Now, I'm famously in possession of several tinfoil hats, Dave, and I wear those hats on my head as badge of honor because it is my perspective that, quite honestly, this simple and lazy position to take on an awful lot of things is, oh, that couldn't happen. Time and again, if you have any interest in history or politics, you will understand that, yeah, it could happen. And more to the point, Dave, it does happen. Now, you will be accused of extreme looniness if you talk about conspiracies in those 2 realms. If you start talking about them in football, my friend, you are the bottom feeder lunatic. And so I have steered very, very, very clear of anything regarding that. I will, however, immediately point out if I smell a rat. I am not saying it's exclusively a rat that is aimed at the neck of Liverpool, but I do think there is something very hinky going on. And just to set this up another little bit, nobody wants to think about this. Nobody wants to talk about this. It's a deeply unpopular subject. But a lot of international sport has a very unfortunate history with fixing and with, for want of a better word, staging. And that has been sort of objectively proven over the years. Now, nobody wants to think about these things. The last thing I want to do is think about these things. And if you're already turning off your device because, they're going to talk about how everything's against Liverpool, well, you're missing the point. But we have to live in the real world, and we have to address the things that actually do and can happen and why they might happen. The other way that we can approach this conversation, and this may be the Occam's razor of it, is that, well, is it incompetence? Or is it corruption, or is it incompetence? And here's where we get to, like I say, full circle round to the PGMOL and what's happening. There's a guy there running the show, apparently, who came out recently, spoke publicly, Dave, and all he did was throw a lot of diesel on a very, very healthy-looking fire. So let's begin with this, your immediate feedback to Liverpool specifically and the PGMOL, and then the PGMOL in general, of what you think is going on here, because we've been on the receiving end of some horrendous calls. People now are so obsessed that they're looking at Tierney and whoever else is going to be on the next Liverpool match and wincing, and I get it. So framing the thing is, should we do anything about this as a club, as a league? Let me just get your initial response to that.
Yeah, to be honest, it's one where I always, as you know, try to be balanced, think about it from both sides. But I think I'm getting to the stage where I'm donning my tin hat as well. And I am like Mel Gibson in that movie with Julia Roberts, where he's the big conspiracy theories. And I've got the petrol can and the match ready, to be honest, Trev. It really felt like that. I mean, as you said, Howard Webb, and we'll all have our thoughts, and that name will provoke reactions. We all saw that show, and before that show, we're all thinking back to, right, they're going to talk about the Doku and McAllister penalty incident. They're just going to come out and say, yeah, we got it wrong. We were all expecting that. We've heard this a million times before. It's another one. We chalk it up and off we go. And then they set it up, don't they? And Michael Owen, who's obviously taken one too many of those apple cores to the head that he's been throwing like basketballs, he's all like, oh, it wasn't it? I'm looking at it, and you're thinking, we know you're not the brightest, Michael. It's a penalty. Let's just, set your show up right and do it that way. And then Howard Webb comes on the screen, doesn't he, Trev? And he does his, check complete nonsense. He kept saying that as though that validated it in some way, that check complete, yeah, I agree with the decision. But if you're given a penalty, I'd agreed with that decision. It's one of them. All the political tidbits, and they even see how the nice ruling came out that the committee at the PGMOL looked at it and gave it 3-2. Just that nice, perfect weighting of it could have been, couldn't have been. And the thing is, you looked at that and you thought, what? Why are you doing this? Like you said, it's just pouring diesel on the bonfire. We'd actually be better if you just came out and said, nah, it's a penalty, we got it wrong. We'd be pissed off and but we'd understand it. And now, like you said, you start looking back at stuff and you're thinking, well, the Odegaard handball, where he basically played basketball, didn't he, with it in the Arsenal draw at Anfield. The Diaz one, you go back to maybe the most horrendous incident, PGMOL of the season. And now you start to think a little bit, again, people getting tin hats, but what is Howard Webb doing now? Has he gone, well, I can't just keep coming on and saying the same thing. We'll go a different tack, lads. We'll go out and say, it is, it could have been, it wouldn't, and we'll get the tribalism of the others on side, because let's be honest, there's a fan base of City and there's a fan base of Arsenal, the ones that just hate us, as you know, Trev, who are loving that, thinking, go on, you know what they're saying, they're watching it, go on, Howard, that's right. They know how this game works. It's so annoying that way as well. And then the other thing, Michael Oliver, I mean, that's the Kaiser Soze of this whole thing. And I mean, you have to be careful on this, because Hairy Hands Keys has called it, and Keith Hackett, the former head of the refs, has called it. Michael Oliver, they're terrified of making calls against him. Michael Oliver carries that FIFA power. Michael Oliver has also refereed quite a few games in a certain part of the world associated with Manchester City as well, hasn't he, as people have raised. And it's Michael Oliver, Trev, that does not seem to give Liverpool these decisions in these big games as well. So there is that sort of undercurrent to it all, but I don't just sit on the side if it's one of them anymore. Like, it's a cumulative effect now as well, isn't it? And the fact they came out and said this, yeah, I'm a bit pissed off with this whole PGMOL thing, Trev. I'm not going to lie at all.
I think if you have your initial response is, no, there's nothing to that. That's understandable. And I do understand that as a default position. I do. Not everyone in the world is as cynical as me. Not everyone in the world has read about as much human treachery as I have. So I understand. It's absolutely fine. It's probably a healthy way to go through your life. But if you keep doing it in the face of clear evidence to the contrary, then I start to wonder what's going on with you. Are you adopting, interestingly enough, a kind of a biased position without examining the evidence while you're claiming to be super balanced and level? And you said a very interesting thing there, Dave, which is, tribalism. When you get tribalism involved, it doesn't matter how egregious the decision is. Once you appeal to tribalism, you are, and we've seen this again, and I expand out and extrapolate out into the wider world, it doesn't matter how egregious the call is, how awful the crime is. If you appeal to tribalism, you will get people who will justify that, X equals Y when it doesn't, that black is white when it isn't. And it just has that feel about it. And I think you're right. I think something happened with that Howard Webb thing where if it had been yet another one of we got it wrong, then I think those people who say, don't be so ridiculous and naive, there's nothing going on, they would have been actually ironically emboldened to stay in that position. What they did was they took even the people who are hanging on by their just fingernails to that position and pulled a few of them off that cliff, because now even the likes of yourself, who I know you always go out your way to go, hey, let's not assume anything daft like that, are starting to say, something's rotten in the state of Denmark. What is going on? So let's us not fall into the trap of tribalism for a second. Let's us not get into the whole, they're all against us and what are we going to do? I don't find that helpful. I don't find people obsessing now about who's going to be in charge of Liverpool's next game helpful. That's a personal thing. I don't find it helpful to think about that. You, if that's what you want to do, you do you. I just don't find it helpful because I find it puts you in a kind of pessimistic state immediately. And this team have told us again and again that they overcome odds. And if we're going to win this thing this year, we're going to have to overcome all of the odds all the time, every week. That's how it's going to be. It's going to be one of those seasons, and that's what Jurgen Klopp was built for. So yeah. I guess embrace it. So let's take the tribalism out of it. Let's talk instead about not corruption. Let's talk about incompetence. Let's talk about that, because that is the best case scenario, Dave. And I think that's very, very disappointing and depressing and upsetting, is that the best case scenario on the back of that Webb thing now is, oh, Jesus, these lads are just shit at what they do. And what people have been saying is right. So where do we go if that's the case? And what can we, as an institution, as a football club, one of the top clubs in the land, what can we do about it without making it about us? Is there what action can be taken by Liverpool Football Club here, do you think?
It's a great question. It's got to be subtle, Trev, because if you look at Forest, they've appointed Clattenburg in between his reffing gladiators thing, haven't they? And they've tried that way to get lobbying. And to be fair, a lot of people come out and said, that's mental, that's not going to work. So you don't want to go down that route. Now, old Rat Boy at Sky has been the most vocal of that. And whenever something comes up, he's obviously Howard, the PGMOL's pal. He's the one to sort of lobby, isn't he, and say, no, come on, the club's bad, all that stuff. So we've got to be clever with this. The first thing for me that's big, it's horrible to say, we know Kloppo's leaving. Kloppo can be smart about this, as in he can start putting a bit of pressure on refs, like managers do, or they've done historically, as we know, and just calling a few things out as well, subtly. Plus, as time goes on and we get right to the end, he can be a little less than subtle, can't he? And just, apply pressure in a direct way. Because, by the way, he's leaving. What are they going to do to him, Trev? They're going to threaten him with like a ban when he's, so he can just be subtle. That's the first thing. The second thing, I love saying this because it's my devious brain and it might just be true, not true, don't get me wrong, but Mickey Edwards is back there. We know how he loves a good media briefing, doesn't he, and little subtle things. We can just get the little patch journos on the side and just start weaving in stories that way. And before anyone says, what are you talking about, this, City players, City managers have done interviews about PGMOL and big calls, which I'm sure we'll get to later. Look at Vinny Kompany with his, it's, we've got to abide by these decisions. Yet as soon as one goes against him, it's ridiculous. Look at the tribalism. Big Ange, another one, isn't he, Trev? Do you know what I mean? We've got to start. You don't have to just go sledgehammer because people will jump on that, and I get it, but we can be subtle in the way we do this in terms of media briefings. Jurgen Klopp just cleverly applying pressure as well. Before anyone says that doesn't happen, well, maybe you're not old enough to have lived through the whole Fergie era at Old Trafford and what he used to do. We know how this thing. Pep's been talking about refs this season on a number of occasions. It's just because of maybe the way certain media bias, shall we say, leans. It's not really being called out. So maybe a little bit, if you can't beat them, join them a bit, Trev. But I would like to see, especially before Jurgen Klopp goes, subtle maybe to start with, sledgehammer at the end, might with you position, but we've got to sort of apply pressure in a smart way. And I know everyone loves those victories of when it was everyone against us, and that's great. But you have to push that line at times, Trev, don't you? So that is what I would like to see, a bit of subtle interference, shall we say, from Jurgen Klopp and Michael Edwards.
I relish the thought of that. I'll be honest with you. I love the idea of a little bit of cynical scheming. Very much like yourself in that regard. The more cunning and devious and dark arts, the better. It will help me enjoy any potential victory even more. I do think it's very interesting what you were talking about there with the likes of Ange Postecoglou, with the likes of Kompany, and famously as well Arteta.
Yeah.
All of these guys have pretty much made themselves hostages to fortune. They have gone out there and done the virtue signal about how we have to be super kind to our refs who have a super difficult job, and we're super supportive of them. And then, like you say, the minute the opportunity arises for them to have a little moan when something goes against them, they do. They make themselves out to be the hypocrites that they actually are and were when they were doing that. And you see, individually, each of those, from Liverpool fans as well, got praise because it's a little microcosm of the thing we were talking about before. They are saying, that couldn't happen and we need to support. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you get one too many kicks in the head and you go, they're all out to get us. And, you lurch to the other end. So usually the truth is somewhere in between here. So I come back to a simple question again. We can't get into speculation about potential reasons for decisions being made that are other than incompetence. We're not in a position where we can do anything other than speculate that if it can happen in other sports, if it can happen in football famously as well, then it can happen elsewhere. That's all we will say on that. There's no point in us saying anything else because we have no evidence. The only thing we have is a string, and you listed some of them there, Doku, Diaz, Odegaard, a string of these things that seem to have gone against Liverpool. And so we can get all bent out of shape. But let's go with the more obvious thing. Let's assume incompetence rather than corruption.
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes, and games consoles. Visit libertyshield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
Yeah, I'm a little uneasy doing that, but I also understand why we should do that. If we are to assume incompetence rather than corruption, again, I come back to you in terms of a question about a decision that we can make. Yes, you've answered the question about what we can do to perhaps lean into this a little bit and try to take advantage of it a little bit from a utilization of the media point of view. But in the bigger picture here, and maybe it's not the time to be thinking about a bigger picture when you've got a potential league title on the table. But in the bigger picture, is there something Liverpool can do to lead here when it comes to now at this stage, blatant and constant and very unsettling incompetence?
It's you want them to, but you know the danger of leading on it is you put yourselves up against the refs, and if it doesn't work, they are going to look to hammer you, and then we become the enemy of the PGMOL, which you don't want, let's be honest. And much you hate them, you do not want that, because the dangers to that are vast, and we don't want to go down that road whatsoever. What I would like, and it's a good question, because longer term for me, especially with the things like the regulator coming into football and looking at the whole business, I do think, and again, it might be subtle media briefings and the way you do it, they should be talking about these separation of like on-pitch officials, VAR officials, specialists. How do we work that? I've seen some great things, and people can say this is tin hats, but it's not. A lot of respected people saying we have the best players in the Premier League, but we clearly don't have the best officials by some distance. So what did we do when that first occurred? We brought in the best officials, or brought best players. So why can't we do the same, Trev? That type of thing. That is something that longer term, if it's for the good of the game, as people talk about, Liverpool should be key in influencing. It's going to be difficult for them to take the lead. I wouldn't want them to take the lead, I have to be honest, because of pitting themselves up against PGMOL. But clever media briefings, the good of the game, yeah, something needs to happen with the PGMOL. And to be honest, this might sound awkward or whatever, I don't think Howard Webb is working as they thought. Because you remember when he first came in, he was going to take over from Mike Riley. He was going to revolutionise it. And he was the expert, the best rep. That's going so far. So I think there is a few questions around how he operates as well. But yeah, for the big decision on that, we can't lead directly, but we can influence in a careful way.
And in terms of just the organisation, just as a last point, and maybe a sort of a root and branch shake-up that I think everybody thinks it needs. Nobody's got any issues if you've got like a particularly strong character as a referee. We all remember the likes of Kalina and how much awe he was held in, unless he was given a decision against you when you hated him. And that's just what a referee is. It has ever been thus, it will always be thus.
Yeah.
But you could objectively say that this is a strong character, and you got the impression that he wasn't being influenced by anybody. What we know, Dave, from the casual admitting of Mr. Monumental Error himself, Mike Dean, that it is a sort of a boys' club.
Yeah.
That it is a sort of a you watch out for your mates angle. Like he said the quiet part out loud on TV, then he tried to roll back on it several times. It was what we always expected. It was what the obvious flaw with VAR was from the start, that anyone bar the most ridiculous tech sort of, technophiles and robot shaggers, everyone could see it. It was going to be the human application of the technology. And if there's human input here, you're dealing with human things like emotions, and also things like loyalty. And that's an issue. And again, like I say, just one other thing that I'm thinking that the club could possibly be leading the charge on is that idea of a separation of church and state, right? Let's get the VAR entity to be separate. Why is that not something that's under serious consideration if we are as serious about being the best league in the world, TM? Why is that not something that's been considered? Why is it necessary to have, again, to hold yourself as this almost hostage to fortune by having the same people making decisions on the field as are going to be the people who are making decisions in the little computer booth the next week? That to me is something that we could actually lead on in terms of a suggestion that I think everybody would welcome.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I think you're right. I think I don't like going down and looking at the officials, but how many games do we have someone from Greater Manchester involved? And then it can sometimes be you have an awkward situation, as you say, with the on-the-pitch ref. Oh, they're not our on-the-pitch ref, they're the VAR. So instantly, you're going to leave yourself open to, well, if that comes to a 50-50 decision, we know which way that's going. Like you said, they're just not smart in the sense of take as much as you can out of it. Like even the offsides when they didn't want them semi-automated. Why? Just make them as automated as possible. Like that makes it easier for you guys in terms of there can be no accusation of bias. Like you say, even foreign officials, people not being smart on that appointment, separating VAR and on the pitch would just be smart. It's smart. So do I think it will happen, Trev? Absolutely not. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing the club just subtly influence that. And, all people in football should be doing that type of thing as well. But do I think it will happen? Absolutely not.
Yay! So we've ended our first topic on an upbeat note that nothing will change and we're just going to have to deal with it. And I think that's the most realistic outcome, to be perfectly honest, where Dave's landed there. The second topic we want to look at is Manchester City adjacent or directly related in terms of, let's just say, the reaction of some people associated with said club recently as the pressure starts to build and we approach the tail end of the season, the last 10 games and all that stuff. I'd like you to set us up here, if you wouldn't mind, because there are at least maybe 3 separate things that show that perhaps we may have, and the club may have, and Liverpool under the waning days of Klopp, and all that means, may have bothered a little bit Guardiola and his lot. Just set us up here in terms of why this was a topic that the two of us wanted to talk about.
This is a heady mix. I'm almost going to build it in terms of a reverse timeline here, because I think it is important we must work our way backwards that way. So if you think the most recent ones we've had, we've obviously had the Doku incident, the McAllister non-penalty from the big game. We know that. Think about what happened after that, Trev. Kyle Walker does an interview with Sky Sports. Now, in that interview, he talks about praising the referee, courage under pressure, all that type of thing, made the right call. Have you ever seen a player go on big channel like that after a game that's involved them and even discuss so blatantly as well? And you can see you got praise from people like Dermot Gallagher, the City fans. So what's the root cause of that? They knew that day we had them rattled. We're still probably a bit disappointed we didn't put them to the sword that day, didn't we? We dominated them that game. But it clearly rattled City that way. You have to be clear on that. So that's the first thing. You even work the timeline back a bit further and going back to when Trent did that lovely interview when he was asked about glory. And he's like, well, to be honest, the essence of his interview was City's trophies don't really mean anything because no one turns up even when they win all these, but it means more at us. Look at what we had. Ours have got a bigger fan base. That rattled them massively because let's be honest, after that, Pep was asked, he was snippy and gave his thoughts to say, oh, well, that's fine. He tried to do that, oh, it's fine, but, we won 5 trophies. Akanji then comes out and does his, weird interview where he's driving in the car and someone's trying to film him like it's a nonchalant, everyday event and said, well, don't know why it's like that. We won more trophies than them, blah, blah, blah. Haaland gets asked, and Haaland comes out and says something about it at the same time. So one Trent comment in an interview, which wasn't about City, was just about him, Liverpool, and his career, prompts two players and one head coach to come out and say those types of things. And I mean, I even jumped the timeline right to the start. If you don't think Liverpool have got the 115ers rattled, look at what Declan Rice, the Arsenal captain, the Arsenal England captain, was saying the other day. He said in an interview, I spoke to John Stones and said, Stonesy, because they're doing weird language, don't they, these footballers, for England. Are you excited for the weekend? And John Stones, according to Declan Rice, said, why, what is it? It's because we're playing you. It's City versus Arsenal. Oh, are we? That'll be fun. Now, Declan Rice had a big smile on his face in his big dopeness without realising that's because they do not see you, Declan, as a direct rival. They expect you to fall away, as most of the country do. He kind of just missed that point. Clearly went over his head as he's smiling through the interview, but hey-ho. So it's a long time, man. I've set it up, Trev, because it's important. All those factors go into it. And the Kyle Walker going on TV the day after that game to try and sell that Doku McAllister incident. They know we're there. The 115ers, we've got them rattled. Let's be clear on that. Let's be clear. Every other thing that comes up with Liverpool players, because no City people go, no. If we're asked, we just talk one game at a time, don't we? The focus. One Trent comment, two players, a manager, and then even the other day, Kyle Walker tried to rewind it back a little bit. So he went on bloody Ferdinand's podcast, that 5 nonsense that he went on. And all of a sudden, he knew what he'd done. He was praising Trent, Trev, all of a sudden going, Trent's the best passer, he's this, and he's this, and he's this. At which point it was brilliant because all the City fans piled on and go, whoa, you play with De Bruyne, why are you praising Trent and all this? So all the City fans are like, why are you going like... We have affected the 115ers. It's beautiful, and I'm here for every minute of it. I've got to be honest.
I knew you would be. This is the type of thing that you openly revel in. I quietly revel in because I pretend, unlike yourself, I pretend that I'm a nice lad, but I'm not really a nice lad. And we can, I think, happily take some pleasure in watching them squirm a little bit. I'm loving the new moniker for City, by the way. I'm having that. I'm going to call them that. Listen, little sidebar. Just indulge me on this before we get back into this topic, because there's a couple of segues back into our links back into the previous one. Ian Wright got a lot of praise recently for saying that it's not. Basically, the gist of what he was saying is we have to remember that Arsenal or that City are facing these charges, and that. It's not really fair on the fans or on the players. And that was the gist of what Wright said. Now, an awful lot of our lot, because we can be as one-eyed as any supporters, if not more so in cases. They read that as Ian Wright backing, the fight against City's corruption. That's not what it was for me at all. That's not what it came across as at all. And that's a perfect example of tribalism, and that's a perfect example of hearing what you want to hear. And I just wonder if actually it had the opposite effect on me, because I was thinking, oh my God, is in many ways Ian Wright here and the publicization of what he said, is it almost validating, legitimizing the concept of, well, the players and the manager have nothing to do with it. It's not their fault. And you and I will have said that in our own way. We'll have said, yes, the players on the park are better over the course of the season by a point than us twice. Well done. Hats off. Cost you enough. But you have to just hold up your hands a minute. We lost those leagues. That's it. It gives me no solace to think cheaters won them, whatever, because at the end of the day, it's what's happening on the park. It's different to the PGMOL discussion. It's a different thing.
Hey guys, it's Eddie Gibbs from Anfield Index here. I hope you're enjoying this podcast, and I'm sorry to call time on the show before it ends. In the current climate, it's tougher than ever before to offer podcasts for free. At Anfield Index, we produce over 75 free shows every month, which I'm confident is unparalleled in the LFC sphere. Whilst we'd love to offer everything for free, the production costs now make this impossible. That said, we don't want to follow the model of other channels and lock all of our content behind a paywall. So what we've decided to do is to continue offering every show for free, but cut that offering to 30 minutes on our longer shows. So to get all of our shows in full and enjoy the best of everything we have to offer, we really hope you'll consider supporting the channel and signing up at AnfieldIndexPro.com. For about the price of 1 cup of coffee, you'll get every podcast in full with 0 ads. You'll also get access to our LFC VIP community, where you can enjoy live podcasts, engage with our podcasters, and chat with other Reds in real time. So that website again, AnfieldIndexPro.com. Join today.
Sports Social Podcast Network.